Hey there everyone, welcome to Peace Through Truth. It is Thursday, April 9th, 2015, 10:06 p.m. as I'm recording this. I actually was talking to a retired U.S. Army helicopter mechanic today whose son is an active MP. And essentially what happens is his son normally gives him a heads up when he's got leave and he's coming home. And this time, we live down here in Florida, and this time his son just came home from up north and didn't really like surprise him with anything. Wasn't like, surprise, I'm home, didn't want to tell you, anything like that. So, whatever. He just figured it was becoming routine. He's been back from Afghanistan for, probably almost a year now. Anyway, it came up in conversation that since he's been back from Afghanistan, this Army MP has been being sent out into the public in plain clothes to go to bars and not to intentionally seek out narcotics, but to hang out and see if anybody offers narcotics. Now, this is like a different kind of level of trolling, you know what I mean? It's just like what the street level narcotics cops are doing at your police department and sheriff's department level, except for these are actual, in some cases, combat veteran Army MPs. You know what I mean? A lot of these MPs have never seen any action. They've always just been on the base or on the cops or whatever you want to call them. But these this particular group of guys just got back from Afghanistan not too long ago. So, they've at least, been on deployment. So they're not right out of basic. Anyway, what I'm getting at is he's down in Florida. And the guy that I'm talking to hadn't heard of the drills in Fort Lauderdale. And when I told him about the drills that were running in Fort Lauderdale about a week ago, he got a big shit-eating grin on his face. No, we've all seen it. I'm not going to run through the footage anymore. And the reason why I didn't report on it is I've just been so busy in my real life that I have not had time to sit down and do a video. And I felt like everybody else was reporting more information on Jade Helm than I ever could. So why muddy up the waters with, lesser valuable information? Anyway, he said that where he lives, he watched a bunch of helicopters going south, which is strange because where we live, we normally see the helicopters going north out of the Sikorsky plant, not south. So he said that they must have been coming from probably Patrick Air Force Base or further north, and they were headed down south, probably towards Homestead, the Homestead base, or somewhere down that area. And that those were probably the helicopters that took part in this exercise. He said most of them were black, only a few of them were dark gray. He said for the most part they were all black, and he thought it was really strange the amount going south because he never saw more than like one helicopter flying south, and he said he saw a bunch. And he's an ex-Army helicopter pilot, so for him to say a bunch of helicopters, he meant a bunch. You know what I mean? Anyway, I didn't want to pick his brain too hard. He knows I have a channel, and he knows I report this stuff. So I'm, trying to leave him as anonymous as possible. But essentially, what he's getting at is he believes that his son has been going to these bars down here, acting as a undercover operative down here, trying to locate narcotics and infiltrate, I guess, drug rings and whatnot down here. Now, make of that what you will, you know what I mean? But what I want to get at is this here Posse Comitatus Act. The Posse Comitatus Act is a United States federal law that was originally signed on June 18th of 1878 by President Rutherford B. Hayes. The purpose of the act, in concert with the Insurrection Act of 1807, is to limit the powers of the federal government in using its military personnel to act as domestic law enforcement personnel, kind of like a undercover narcotics agent. It was passed as an amendment to an Army appropriation bill following the end of Reconstruction and was subsequently updated in 1956 and 1981. The The Act only specifically applies to the Army, and as amended in 1956, the Air Force. While the Act does not explicitly mention the naval services, specifically the Navy and the Marine Corps, the Department of the Navy has prescribed regulations that are generally construed to give the Act force with respect to those services as well. Then putting construed in there means it doesn't mean shit. It means it doesn't mean a damn thing. The Act does not apply to the National Guard under state authority from acting in a law enforcement capacity within its home state or an adjacent state if invited by that state's governor. The United States Coast Guard, which operates under the Department of Homeland Security, is not covered by the Posse Comitatus Act either, primarily because although the Coast Guard is an armed service, it also has both a maritime law enforcement mission and a federal regulatory agency mission. So just going over real quick again, this is supposed to protect us from having the Army act as a law enforcement capacity or under a law enforcement capacity. So it's supposed to prevent the Army from sending their MPs, their military policemen, into public undercover to essentially entrap people. I mean, if you want to look at it that way. But so, not necessarily the Navy and the Marines, but they say that they signed on, so, whatever. But yeah, so it's supposed to protect us. What I thought was really interesting about this was the Coast Guard being exempt, essentially. The United States Coast Guard, which operates under the Department of Homeland Security, is not covered by the Posse Comitatus Act. And as it turns out, the recent shooting in the Carolinas, everybody's heard about this alleged Michael Thomas Slaughter shooting. Well, he's actually ex-Coast Guard, and the other guy, this guy, is actually an honorably discharged Coast Guard. I found that out thanks to Matty D for Truth's Walter Scott U.S. Coast Guard coincidence video he put out yesterday. Once again, good looking out, Matty. Good find there. I think that was very interesting. Anyway, if you follow his link to this MSN page here, a look at the key players in fatal shooting by police officer. If you scroll down, well, first of all, if you read this sorry sack of shit of an article, you'll see that it is complete and utter social engineering. It's race. It's stirring the race pot completely. I mean, Slaughter is white. Period. I mean, it's like, period. You know what I mean? I don't even know what to say. But other than that, another thing that's kind of suspicious is the dude's already fired. I don't think I've ever heard of that, a police officer being fired, even for something like this, even if this was real. I've never heard of that. They almost always put them on paid administrative leave until their trial or their hearing or their exoneration or whatever. So that was very strange. But it says here that Slaughter served in the United States Coast Guard and had been with North Charleston Police for 5 years. So Slaughter has a Coast Guard connection, and the victim here, a black man, they make sure to tell you, he was in the Coast Guard and had been honorably discharged. It says right here, had been honorably discharged from the U.S. Coast Guard. So, once again, good find, Matty, man. I mean, does that tie into this Posse Comitatus Act and the fact that the Coast Guard has essentially a larger jurisdiction and, basically less restrictions on them as far as this domestic law enforcement capacity goes? Is that why they're using them to fake these shootings? And does the fact that the Act does not explicitly mention naval services have something to do with the naval yard shootings? But anyway, as soon as I found out that you know, active Army MPs are actually being forced to go out into public to the bars to mingle with everyday citizens well ahead of Jade Helm. I had to pass that information along, and considering that they're probably doing it down here as Jade Helm, as you know, as we speak, what can you say? That's some crazy ass shit. So anyway, I just wanted to pass what I know along, what I heard firsthand from someone that I trust, an Army veteran, a true patriot, and you know, he told me his son's out there doing this stuff. So when I started to make the video on that, and I wanted to bring up the Posse Comitatus Act, I saw all that crap about the Coast Guard, and that reminded me about Matty D's video. If you haven't subscribed to Matty D, go do that. And as always, guys, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Take care, guys. God bless.